Hi, I'm Maestro Hamilton, and welcome to another episode of Through the Vine. Today we get to speak with Arron Tritt, that is a luminary and a visionary, psychonaut and explorer of consciousness. He's going to take us deep into the mainframe of consciousness and oneness, communicating with Source, God, universe, and the direct experiences that you have when you're in those states. Here at Blue Morpho, we're always striving to be able to give you the very best. And so you can come and experience plant medicine retreats with us. Check us out at bluemorphotours.com and come to one of our very special events. We've been sharing plant medicine for the last 20 years, and we seek to be the pinnacle in this emerging space. Here we go.
So, in the vision, I'm going to speak about my very first experience with ayahuasca because it changed my life forever in untold amounts of ways that are unfolding. Drinking the medicine itself was beautiful. The set and setting was amazing, very small and comfortable. There was only a few people in the ceremony in a very beautiful house in the mountains. And kind of going through the onset process and into the visionary experience, I really was taken for a ride. My visions were, like you say, an 11 out of 10 in the visions. My total, this reality went away. And I had to go purge in the bathroom, top and bottom purging extensively in my first vision. And when I was in the bathroom, this planet went away, and ayahuasca showed up as a grandmother, humanoid, psychedelic colored being. And she reached inside of me and, with a lot of kindness and compassion, just squeezed all of the shame about my own existence out of me, about my previous addictions and falling short of the mark and all of those kinds of things. And she said, "Sweet baby, you don't need any of this," and was just wringing me out, both sides. And there was nowhere to go. It was just happening. And it was not even challenging. It was really just felt like it had to happen. And like this beautiful teacher was serving me at the most fundamental level of where I needed it. And when she finished doing that, she gave me back enough vision to deal with my logistics. And leaving the bathroom space, I got another lesson. With the shift of light, I could not see my mat at all and had to ask for help from the facilitator just to get back to my space. And I found in these medicine ceremonies that really small things can become profound lessons. And so learning to ask another man for help with something so basic as I can't walk to my bed was really a useful lesson in my life, because it's affected many other things downstream from that, as versus being that stoic, I can do everything by myself kind of philosophy. So I laid back down on my mat, and ayahuasca said, "Now that you have that out of the way, there's all this space inside of you. So let me show you what to do with that space," and showed me how to move a level of power through the space that had been created by purging all of that shame consciousness, and to organize a level of energy flow through me into productive flow rather than dysregulated, stuck energy. She gave me this sound of pia, whatever it was very clear. And I've seen it in many different psychedelic visions afterwards. It's just like a certain tonality or something that I can, in my consciousness, refer to in this way of when I need to draw from some power. I can have this pressure release, energetic flow from that ceremony. And this whole process took, who knows, real time, maybe 2 hours, something like that, in this peak visionary experience. And then landing the plane, I had this new sense of self, this new sense of power, and had a little bit more agency as the medicine was coming down to navigate the space with awareness. And I have been always a seeker and studying all these different philosophies of life, and some of the meditations of like going to like a golden egg inside of the self. And so I was able to go and explore these very specific places that I'd been curious about in my own consciousness or in the universe, and just being like sitting with that. Like, what is it like to be inside of a golden egg? What is it like to be in this magical castle? And just playing with that as the visions became more and more subtle, landing the plane. And the experience was profound. The amount of heart openness that it created when I was less self-referential was awesome. And it's just perpetually unfolded in my life for years now after that. And many ceremonies have had incredible life-changing aspects where I don't think the process ever stops at all. It just keeps building on and building on and building on as you get more and more organized as a being. So that was my first ceremony. And my very last ceremony just a few weeks ago, after going through some very challenging top and bottom purging again all weekend, I found like this energy of the king inside of myself. And I had hours of just understanding how my whole life made sense, all of the trauma, all of the suffering, all the lessons like that brought me to where I am now. I had all this clarity of the unlocked potential of the self without fear, without limitation. Just who am I when I properly relate to the whole universe, with service to others and honoring of the self from the space of knowing I'm held by God, by the universe. And that's my last one also. So that's kind of my first and my last, and to brought me to this moment where I am right now with you here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's incredible. You mentioned earlier going into what is like 11 out of 10 in vision. Let's walk into that moment that makes it an 11. What are you sensing? What are you feeling? What's the visual connotation or component of it? What's going on in your mind for people who haven't had this experience? Let's try to break that down.
Yeah. The sensations in ayahuasca are very big. It's an amplifier of all of the senses. For me, during like getting to that 11 out of 10 space, the onset process is sometimes very easy and sometimes very challenging. Sometimes it can come with fear and some body anxiety. Sometimes it just turns on with a lot of effortless flow. So for me, that ranges dramatically what that feels like to get into this visionary space. But that 11 out of 10, for me, none of the physical reality exists anymore around me. There's like a different dimension overlaid on top of this dimension. And sometimes my like spidey senses or my normal senses, I can navigate the space through what seems like intuition or something like that. And sometimes I can't, and there's just no reality here. And moving would be maybe step on somebody or something like that, because I can't even see anything. And the visions are beautiful. For me, there's always golds and blues and whites and reds and all these rainbow colors at various times. There's specific spirits and beings. Sometimes it's like the code of the universe. The visions dramatically vary, but when it's 11 out of 10 for me, it's my open eyes, closed eyes. There's nothing in this material plane that I can identify. Whereas sometimes you can have very big visions that aren't quite as extreme, where there's like an overlay on top of a cartoonified version of this space.
Describe that other dimensionality. There's so much to unpack here. In this other dimensionality, what does that seem like?
Mm,
What makes it other dimensionality than just these are the walls, this is the floor, this is the space I've always been in my mind?
mm. One thing that I see all the time in vision, it seems to me like as I open into the field, I go to some sort of space that feels like an organizing space of my own consciousness. And it seems like it's very colorful, it's always moving. And it seems to me like being inside of a Rubik's Cube, but times a level of complexity. And there are portals that open and close depending on where source wants to take me and to show me things. And so inside of this, like inside out Rubik's Cube, there's always a similar being. I perceive it as source when I ask who it is. And it first organizes me, moves fluids through my consciousness, gets rid of things like that don't fit into the code of my own essence or the essence of the universe, whatever is happening there. It seems very, it seems more me than I am. It's like the very first few times it was very confusing to have another entity be so close to me, like closer than breath, more fundamental than my awareness almost. And and then it can do stuff to me. And that stuff has always been useful and beautiful, but it's not always easy. It can be very, uh, very uncomfortable sometimes. Uh, and as I've been more and more in the medicine, I've learned to trust that experience and relax about that quite a lot. But the first few times, the discomfort was very high, just because it's so foreign. There's no way to describe what it is with any level of accuracy because the it's moving so fluid like, it's so colorful, but it's so clear. The vision is so precise and accurate. I always sense that it's opening into this field is accessing a more fundamental level of reality than the material plane, and the material plane develops from this type of space. So that's how I perceive it right now, is that the material world is, to some degree, it's like derivative of this other consciousness dimension. And inside of this field, in this consciousness dimension, I've I've been working with this source entity inside of this cubic space to just organize my own reality, to organize my thoughts and my fears and my orientation to existence. And as I've been doing that more and more, it's really interesting to me how varied that experience can still be based on dose and based on how tired I am or things like that. So sometimes I have what I perceive as quite a lot of agency inside of this framework of where do I want to go? Where do I want to explore? I've been able to like use IFS language. So taking myself and going into myself as a 4-year-old boy. I want to see my 4-year-old boy self in a classroom. And there I was. And then all of a sudden there was 4 of me at 4 years old. And it was I was like, oh, this is disorienting and confusing. And I asked Source to get rid of 3 of them. And a teacher came and shooed them away from the classroom. And I was in this classroom and Source says, well, what do you want to learn about this? And I said, I want to see the morphology of the planet across time. And I watched like the mountains rise and lower and Pangea come and go. And I said, oh, that's cool. I want to go to the surface of Venus. And it shot me to the surface of Venus. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm on this other planet. And then I said, I want to go to the next solar system. And just, I was right there and just exploring it as this curious toddler aspect of myself. And I said, well, this is all really fun and interesting, but I'm not really like growing other than this ability to play in this space. And so I said, how about we come back to where I am on my mat? And I would actually like to have a lot more awareness of how this facilitator is holding the space. And so ayahuasca says, "Is that what you really want?" I said, "That's what I want." And she said, "You sure?" I said, "Yes." And she went boom and turned all my visions off. And I just had awareness of the energy in the space and the rhythm of the flow, but my visions were gone for the whole night. But my awareness was still extremely high. So at this medium dose, there's a lot more agency for me to be able to direct my awareness and co-create. Whereas sometimes I just feel like I get taken over by things, energies in the space, or and my ability to co-create, my percentage of that becomes much lower, and the universe becomes much bigger. Um, it's always interesting and positive on the outcome side, but sometimes it can be very scary.
I love the part where you're discussing this, other dimensional staging ground or geometric place. There's structure to it. I used to call it the architecture of space-time. I'm like, oh, I'm in the actual architecture of space-time, not space-time anymore. I'm in where space-time is coalescing, where it's becoming space-time, and that there's a hyperdimensionality to it, intricacy, code, and presence. And the presence is what people call source, great spirit, creator, or God. And I love how you describe the like presence of it is so close and so all-knowing and so precise and so aware. It gives meaning to those words that I heard of other people said, like, oh, God's everywhere and all-knowing. And it's like, yeah, you don't understand all-knowing until all-knowing is with you in that moment and you're experiencing it. And I resonate with the discomfort that can create early on in our explorations of it. I find it so foreign that you would have the presence of God so omnisciently present in its totality, yet so clear in its interaction. When I've been in those experiences, I've always felt like it made sense to how we were described as the creations of God or the offspring, like the children of God. Like it has that feel to it, like God's been creating the universe the whole time and at some point creates us as part of the universe, and that we're made of source, part of source, and expressing source, yet waking up to that phenomena, that we're in some kind of evolutionary process to becoming comfortable and aware. And it's transcendent of our definitions of ourselves as human beings, or, the men and women we think we are in those ceremonies. There's something more fundamental about it, and it strips you of kind of all aspects of your identity, and it leaves you there in this pure crystalline awareness and place to co-create and manifest. And little by little through my training, I realized we go there almost every time when we go deep into the medicine. That's where we're going to go, and that's ultimately from where we're going to start to explore through the ceremonies themselves. The interaction, I think, is really important for people to know that this isn't a outside bystander kind of perspective, but rather this is a fully self-aware aspect of our consciousness. And I love thinking of it as like the mainframe or the interface of consciousness itself. And I think a lot of people don't understand even the idea that they have consciousness, let alone that consciousness is highly structured, highly dimensional, highly codified, intricate, and contains all of you. There's no hiding any aspect of you from it. The universe has a true history, and your true history in all forms and ways are there, whether you like it or not. That was part of the nature of your evolution, and that from that place, it's really rich for healing. And the colors you describe, I've always described them as infinite. Like you can't put a number to them. It's a color palette that is truly mind-blowing, and I found for me to be one of the most beautiful aspects of these experiences, to be aware of the nature of these colors in our consciousness. When you have an experience like that, in one experience, you've gone back to your mat, what typically comes next? So you're kind of in that place, and then what happens?
So I'll just talk about my most recent ceremony because it's most vivid to my mind. The I did a 2-day ceremony. The first day was really just a lot of purging stuff. I don't know if all of it was mine. I think a lot of it was not mine. The second day, I had a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety that I just had to sit with. I wanted to like eject out of the vision. I didn't want to be there. I wanted it to turn off because I really was having a hard time relaxing. I felt like my consciousness was in a state of emergency. And then I said, well, that's not useful to be stuck in that. And so I had this awareness to downregulate that in my own self with some like sub-audible toning or humming, and kind of organize that into a place of centeredness and ease, which didn't take very long. As soon as I had the awareness that I was out of balance, I organized it, and it just took maybe 2 minutes or something like that. And then I got to have an internal battle for about 10 minutes about how I should deal with getting more blankets because I wanted to be more cozy and comfortable. And I ended up standing up and going to a room and getting multiple blankets and pillows and going back to my mat. And when I laid down and I had gone through this fear and organized it and gone through this taking care of my own physical form, organized that, my whole vision and universe just exploded to infinity. And I was laying there for the next 3 hours, seeing in a hyper clear, hyper aware way of all the ways that I can beneficially serve the planet and also improve my life at the same time. And the amount of thoughts and inspiration coming through was so fast, it was almost manic, because there's no way I could remember the thousands of things that I was seeing and feeling. But the energy of it is something that is very alive inside of me now. This of how do I, not even how do I, but this like ability to see, even in the smallest interaction, how to better people around me, their life experience in small moments. So for me, after this big vision and all this hard stuff, it was hours of exploring and reflecting on and feeling in my physiology this energy flow, like just from the root all the way up through me and out of just what I am without limits. And I also was just fully in love with life, crying because of the beauty of the people I know, the beauty of like my whole existence, the beauty of the people in the ceremonial space, of the medicine. And I just wept with joy and appreciation and love. And it was awesome. It was just awesome. So at the end of this multiple days of just going through it, good, get that low vibe stuff out, whatever it is. And the first day, it was something that I thought I fixed 20 years ago. I didn't even know I was carrying it around. And the depth of the intelligence of the medicine is indescribable.
People say that ayahuasca is incredibly intelligent. Where do you think that intelligence comes from, or how do you think it expresses itself or manifests itself? How is it even possible?
Like we kind of talked about earlier, when you open this portal to this dimension or to this level of awareness, you're really communicating telepathically or with your whole senses, or however that's working, with the structure of existence. And I think it's possible because we're tapping into a level of awareness that created this level of awareness. And I've had experiences with DMT without the ayahuasca vine. I had like where I was able to go into the breakthrough experience and stay there for more than an hour by continuing to go into the DMT. And I was talking to source, and it was showing me the entirety of evolution that brought me to where I was, every aspect of everything. And it knew me in this way for countless lifetimes, none of which seemed to be on this planet. But with my consciousness, it was the timelines of this intelligence are infinite. There's no way to rationally think about these things. Like you use the language trillions of trillions. The numbers are very big of these kinds of spaces. And it also knows, I think, future outcome, but it allows that to be a mystery, and sometimes just teases things. So in that experience, it split my reality into two, and it showed me if I operated in like a pure love light way and a pure malevolent egocentric destructive way, the outcomes of the physical plane of reality, if I made either choice to an extreme limit, and then returned me to a center and said, you have the ability to make decisions about this. But I got to see natural consequences on both sides of that. And again, it's more real than this reality in how it comes across to my perception. So I think that it's possible because we're talking to the thing that made us, that we're made out of.
Yeah, I resonate with that completely. Source intelligence is all the intelligence, and source memory is all the memory, and it's written in the universe itself. It's not like a memory that's somehow part of the universe. It is actually the whole universe, is the memory of the universe. Think of it as like singularity knowing singularity. It's the oneness knowing itself. It's God being aware, and the intelligence being distributed in many different places. And the sort of human egocentric perspective is being this, entity or being that has the intelligence and is more intelligent than everything else. I think just bursts to a recognition of what a small bubble that is, to this much greater intelligence and organizing principle. And often that intelligence doesn't express itself in the way we do with linear languages and spoken languages, but rather has a capacity for information that represents tremendous wholeness and transformation and understanding that's hard for us to put into words. It's just so much awareness at the same time. I would like to backtrack just a little bit and introduce yourself for the audience. Tell them who you are and how you came to plant medicine and where you find yourself now in your life.
For sure. I'm Arron. Thanks for listening, everybody, and being here. I feel like many people's lives, my life has been complicated and mixed in all kinds of different ways. And I started doing psychedelics when I was 14, and I've always been a limit testing human being. I play with that, from doing cornices on snowboarding off of the side of mountains to racing super bikes to doing 20-gram mushroom experiences. Like, I love finding out what I can do, what are possibilities of myself. And part of that has made me great at things, and part of that has really hurt me in my life with addictions and self-destructive behaviors and things like that. So my path to find plant medicine as versus where I work with medicines that really turn my consciousness and my conscious awareness on, as versus things that are just interesting and really actually reduce my level of competency and awareness, has been a very long one. I think I didn't really find that beneficial relationship with plant medicines until my early 30s. So I had almost 20 years of more like party culture, addiction level relationship with my consciousness. And I'm so grateful I've turned that page, because this space is so magical, and it's changed my life in almost every aspect by learning to have go from poverty mindset to abundance, and watching the material reality reflect that awareness, from every night having to have a alcoholic drink to relax, to just loving the totality of the complexity of my life, the depth and beauty of my relationships from with everybody, with my parents, my sister, my friends, my lover, everything, myself, all improved with this real medicine work, and finding a teacher like you that really knows what you can do in these spaces. It's changed my life in ways that are, and I'm at the baby level of it too. It's like, who knows what it's going to happen over the next 20 years. I feel so grateful. And most of my life, I've been a contractor building really beautiful custom bathrooms and custom homes. And over the last year or so, I've started doing some kind of transformational life coaching, helping people work with this when you're in some sort of phase shift, whatever that is, a change of career or a phase of life, from being a mother to not needing to be a mother anymore. You've done that, and what do you do? And working with psilocybin to navigate that has been really fun and beautiful and interesting. And where I'm going with this is kind of multifaceted. And I love the set of the sail I have in my life right now, which is doing the coaching part-time. I'll be working in a sleep study institute pretty soon with psilocybin to treat insomnia in kind of a clinical space. And I'm really practicing with the ayahuasca medicine as much as I possibly can, just to develop that skill set and the ability to navigate it, because I see myself in 10 years aiming it at a level of mastery and just putting in the seat time to get there, whatever that takes. And I love the whole process. So that's a little
Good.
about me and my life.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to go into this transition from the party culture mindset into the consciousness expansion learning mindset, and also go into this psychonaut culture and massive hero doses. I was on a podcast yesterday talking about, somebody who had really scared themselves through the nature of the really big doses that they had been working with, but they come at it from a perspective of really, that seeker adrenaline level kind of perspective, that really pushing the limits. And so I think the consciousness expanding arts is the one that I've heard least talked about in this great psychedelic renaissance. And so I want to understand, go into a little bit more what your experiences were like in the party culture side or hero dose side, into what it's like to train in consciousness, expand your consciousness, and learn through that interface.
I've found both to be beautiful. I've had life-changing, permanent changes in my life with the hero dose self-exploration without a teacher. And I wouldn't have found this path of medicine had I not gone through all of that, for sure. The 20-gram mushroom dose was a day as important as the day my daughter was born. Like, in what I understood about my own power as a being, that dose dissolved the separation in a way that cannot be communicated. And I understood that there was nothing to be afraid of. And it allowed me to start little by little attacking the major defects in my physical reality. And that was just from that limit seeking exploration. I was like, I've done mushrooms hundreds of times before that, and I've done plenty of really big dose stuff, but I wanted to find out, what am I? And there was no music, that was darkness, silence. That was me in a hole. And it was incredible. And I've also had experiences that were very disorganized and full of anxiety and stupid, being in dangerous places and having stuff happen. And I've been lucky that there hasn't been more injury or consequence in my life because of the kind of the reckless nature of my exploration in life. Um, I think that for me, there was always like a level of mischievousness in the psychedelics. And it played to my curiosity of rebellion and just doing stuff. Like, I feel like all the laws about consciousness restrictions are crazy because we can do it. And I think if we can do it and it doesn't hurt anybody else, we should be allowed to do it. So for me, playing with the different substances, all of them, like I've had awesome, beautiful experiences on LSD at just social gatherings and playing. But I'd say the biggest difference between the recreational culture and then plant medicine is the level of focus on orientation of the self in relationship to the world, as versus like just finding out. My philosophy across time, I mean, you find out either way on both these things, but where the general focus is. And there's a big difference between going to a concert on some sort of medium to medium low dose psychedelic and dancing, which is super fun, and drinking a grande cup of ayahuasca and going inside yourself and doing some work. Major difference on the probability of outcome, on what you're going to find and how impactful it's going to be. So I've had moments, another one moment in the recreational way. Back in the day, I was going through a lot in my life. My money was really bad. I was getting divorced. My whole life was falling apart. And I did a reasonable amount of mushrooms just in the basement of the house I was going to lose. And it was the first time out of all the psychedelics I'd done my whole life that I had that mystical non-dual experience where I knew that I was and everything was God, and that I had misunderstood or hadn't seen the nature of reality ever in my life. And it was the first time that turned me on as a human being. It woke me up, and that was in 2017. And one thing that is much different about the medicine space from that kind of unlocked potential and experience was that when I came back to my life after laughing and crying for hours, my life was still a disaster. And I had nobody who could relate to the idea of being God like this. So I had this new awareness, and I had this question of, so what? Like, what do I do with this? I don't have any idea what to do with this, because my life didn't change instantly. My awareness did, but everything was in the process of falling apart. And I think it took that level of chaos in my life for my ego to get beat up enough to have the openness for this non-dual experience. I was so much like fake bravado and stuff like that. It really had to fall apart for me to be vulnerable enough that the universe gave me this moment of grace. So I really do think there's benefit and beauty in all of it. But the frequency and the speed of which you can improve your life is infinitely faster with medicine and practices and groups of peers who are doing the same work to bounce ideas and experiences off of, and having a teacher like you to ask real questions about what's happening, because what happens is very confusing to the intellect. There's no frame of reference for most of it.
Going to go into the idea of this reorienting your understandings of both reality, like seeing into a reality, a fundamental awareness that wasn't there before. And it certainly brings into question, well, what state was I in? If the new state is one of much greater clarity and a much greater depth of understanding of something fundamental about being alive. And this idea of orienting to our lives and to the universe. Can you expand on that?
Reorienting to alignment with the universe. It's uh, it's a level of trust and a level of awareness that I just didn't have before. I think at some point in life, we either do or don't. I think before there's really a mystical awakening, a mystical experience of awareness of non-duality in a experiential way. I don't think that there's actually free will before that moment. I think that we are raised in such patterned ways that we perceive we're making decisions, but there's not a level of overlaid self-reflection possible without that awareness of non-duality, and that awareness that every moment is this co-creation with the God that you're made out of. It's like it's a gift to have that level of awareness, and it's a responsibility at the same time. And because I know what it was like without that level of awareness, and I didn't have the ability to operate differently. It just wasn't possible because I didn't have the vision. It's like you can want to bench press 300 pounds, but if you don't have the muscles to do it, you can't do it. There's just no way. And so I think when there's the experience of seeing through only this level of reality, and now you know something that you can't unknow ever. And so the question always then again is, so what? And what the answer to that so what for me has been to correct my own defects and to try to make the world around me more beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. In that, so what, I think first, gain real sovereign agency, get your choice back. Like you say, have free will for the first time in your life, and transcend the patterning that had good and bad in it for yourself and for the way you related to the world. And then I like taking a really good, clear look at my life and what I was creating in that paradigm of the things that were self-sabotaging and the things that were actually going pretty well. And everything starts from there in, I think, micro step-by-step changes that we can start to address right now. It could be something that I'm thinking. It could be something that I'm feeling. Often we want to look at like the pinnacle thing 10 years from now. That's going to be the thing that I think I have to change right now. And it's not. It's the thing right now that I can do that cumulatively adds little by little by little to transforming my life. And it's grabbing that awareness from the ceremonies and utilizing support that we discover in the ceremonies to help us do it. So when I look back at my training, one of the things I loved about ayahuasca when I first drank it was that it was the first time I got presented with something that I truly thought I could never do. Everything else before that, I was presented like, oh yeah, sure, I could do that. Like maybe not well or as great as somebody else, right? Maybe there's something like I could figure out a little bit about chemistry in school, or I could do something with physics, or I could learn to play this ball sport, or I could climb a mountain and it might take me a little while to train, or I can run, or I had met ayahuasca and I thought, I can't do that. Like, I don't know what that was, but there was the shaman there who was, able to handle himself through the whole thing. And I wasn't. It was just that clear. And then I look back on it now and I realize that it was just a completely progressive step-by-step process, right? And to really embrace that nature. And that I did it at that time with spirit. And early in my training, I met God. And then I did it with spirit and God, which I consider spirit to be the great animus of God. Instead of God being out of the game, God is right in here with us. God is part of it and animating the entirety of this and providing wisdom and support. And so it's part getting that agency to do it ourselves and the humility to receive extraordinary, macrocosmic, divine level support the whole time. And we continue to, go forward from that perspective.
Yeah, and one of the things that's been most profound is so simple for me, but it's like it's the only place that we can move from, which is our objective current reality. It's like looking at ourselves with that level of honesty and removing levels of delusion about where we think we are, and having that clarity that life is whatever it is, and we have whatever parameters of restriction that we've put ourselves in with this, whatever positive, negative decisions we've made across our life. We've developed some mixed level of hole we're stuck in and ladder sticking out of it, and to really look at that with honesty and ask these spirits, ask the medicines to help fill that hole in and dig out of it. And it is this little by little thing. But there's that quote that says most people underestimate what they can do in 10 years and overestimate what they can do in a day. And that's been for sure, my experience is that when we are just showing up every day and doing what we can do in a day with specific intentions on across time, that unbelievable changes in the reality of life happen. Like, I've knocked $250,000 off of my debt in the last 2 years.
Incredible.
And it's like, that was something that like I couldn't even look at when I was afraid of it. So it's like, okay, well, how do you do something like that? How do you, and the answer is you ask for help. Human beings are spirits too. And so it's like, maybe I need a CPA. Maybe I need, right? Like, but that was a lesson that came from asking a shaman help to go to my mat, right? It was a metaphor for my whole reality.
Yeah, I get it. I remember asking in ceremony for support, and the answer was, you need a lawyer. And then my next question was, well, how do I find the right lawyer? And they said, just ask. So I said, help me find the right lawyer. And then like the next day, a friend of mine saying like, oh, by the way, I should introduce you to this lawyer. That kind of a thing where everything just aligns after that moment. It's not always so, I think everything's mystical. So the whole world's mystical, but it's in the mundane levels of our, habituated mystical experience of normal. Integration comes up all the time. It's a big buzzword. How people integrate these experiences, take them back into their normal life. You've had such a expanded exploration of this compared to a person who just goes on a retreat and comes home. So I'd really like to understand your ideas of how you bring in these experiences. I know we've touched on it already a little bit, but kind of go into that idea for somebody, how they can approach bringing in these realizations into their life.
Yeah, having an experience is much different than doing something with it. And just like everything you want to know in life, you have to test things and find out. So I think that there's so many different kinds of insights that you have in the medicine space, and they all add up to being mantras that are just the internal dialogue of life. If you do enough medicine, it's like all these little lessons, they just become how you think, and how you think moves you through the world. But I think that there's a important aspect of integration, which is not just to blindly believe the vision and the insight from the vision, but to take that experience into some sort of reflection. I've done it in so many different ways. It doesn't really matter to me as long as I do that in some way, whether that's I journal or I speak to an AI transcription service and then have ChatGPT help me understand my train of thought. That's a really cool way to do it, because you can have this like AI thinking mirror, says, help me organize this and analyze where I have weak spots and strengths in this understanding. And it can really be a cool tool to reflect on your own life and what are possible things that I could do to apply this. And you ask it, and you can work with those and make decisions with the intellect. For me, the outcomes of all of the medicine I've done so far, the lessons can be very profound, but the actual teachings seem to be incredibly simple to me. Like, be compassionate, be patient with yourself, be kind to other people, be honest with yourself, don't be afraid of dying. Like these kinds of things are things that you can take with you all the time. Integration, it's like you see in something how you were in an experience, how you were wounded by self-abuse or by the abuse of somebody else or something. And you can forgive that experience. And then you can know how much better it is to be free of that experience. And so then you just don't contribute to those things to the planet. You learn how to allow the world to be exactly as it is and not against anything. It's just all you can control is your own creativity with the universe. And other beings are doing whatever they're doing. And there's no need to argue with those things. Like Byron Katie says, it's like you can argue with reality, but it only wins 100% of the time. And so like integration for me has really been this slow process of looking at my life with honesty and saying, like you said, what's working for me and what's not working for me and where do I want to go? And then creating plans and making decisions and then backing that up with long-term action.
That's beautiful.
Like,
I love that. Yeah, integration is a continuous process. I've always thought of it as an implementation of what we're learning. And it's not about having something and going back into my life. It's about the fact that I transcended what my life was, and it's what my life's becoming. So for me, there's a big reorientation to this is who I am and what I'm becoming, and now I'm embracing it. So I was thinking about who I was, and now it's about who I am today and what I'm going to do with this experience.
yeah, like
And
one of my current experiences, I was sitting in a ceremony and was just struck by the beauty of live music, the gift of people bringing, and I made the decision in that moment to develop my musical talent to the point where consciousness flows right through my fingers. And so that's an idea. And the integration is that I wake up at 4 in the morning and I play from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock every day. And I'll do that.
incredible.
And I'll do that until I'm there, right? The integration is making decisions and putting in processes that allow that space to mature into something that develops you into a new being.
It's beautiful. If you could tell yourself, what you know now to the self you were before you started your first ayahuasca ceremony, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
I'm like, I don't even know if I would. I think that the medicine speaks so much magic that the unfolding of the life is the right teaching. It's like I had so much psychedelic experience. I understand how profound they can be, but there was no way to tell even at the level that I'm at right now how much my life would change. The number of beautiful people that have come into my life, um, largely through Blue Morpho. I mean, the gratitude is so high. It's like there's no way to communicate it. And so,
That's
so there was no reason for that. There's no reason for me to go back and give advice because I think that if one feels compelled to any psychedelic and it's like it's there and it feels right, then it's probably right. And it's time. Like I thought about DMT for 4 or 5 years before one night when it just magically appeared in front of me. And when I did it, I realized that if I would have had it earlier, I probably wouldn't have been ready for it.
here on Through the Vine podcast. We like to ask the audience to share questions with us, and we collect the questions and pick a few in each episode. So I have a question that I think would be really interesting for you to answer. It's how do you stop the ego mind from identifying with everything?
How do you stop the ego mind from identifying with everything? I don't know if that's a job for the ego to do. For me, that experience was like mystical, non-dual grace of the universe. That just I was gifted in a moment an experience of transcending that level of life. And I think that living in a more unitive with God as like a center of awareness, rather than me and this body as an awareness, is a much bigger place to be. It's like you're moving with an ocean instead of against the wind on a little tiny boat, and it's easier if you turn down the ego that's grasping for stuff. I think the ego that has an awareness of like, don't trip on that stair is really useful. There's a level of utility of ego, but there's all this wisdom in like Tibetan Buddhism about non-attachment. And I think that those teachings have been very useful as frameworks for my thinking about this. Like in Robert Thurman's introduction to the Book of the Dead, it's, having that awareness of no matter how much money you make and how much stuff you have in your life, like everything you care about is going to slip through your fingers, even your name and your body, and all of your memories, all of it is going to go away. And so why not practice now just doing some of that already? I think it's really useful for me in my life practice to kind of have an omnipresent awareness of mortality. And it makes the life more of a precious gift than the material world, something to be attained.
Yeah, in that frame of thinking, I think expand your awareness to realize that you're really small compared to the rest of the whole universe. And that helps quiet that me voice down when you can then learn to be comfortable in that awareness. That in the ego self, it's the smallest of yourselves, and very important for how you navigate our lives, how we go through, like you say, the utility of it, but allow the grandeur of the universe to be the totality of that, and be grateful for the little bit of ego we get to have in this brief incarnation.
Yeah,
And
I live. Oh, sorry.
no, go on.
I live much more in this space of just my mind all the time being blown by the reality that we have perception at all. Like the fact that we are here experiencing anything is unbelievable. And for me, it's much of life is about how do I play with that while I can. There's no limit to the number of games that we can explore, and like what even are our hands? Like there's no way to know. It's like it's just this perpetual exploration of an ever-changing mystery.
I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. The perpetual moment of the ever-changing mystery resonates deepest with me. Arron, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and wisdom with us today. How can people find you? How could they, get in touch with you, et cetera?
For sure. Soon I'll have my website rebuilt, which is just AaronTritt.com. That's probably the easiest way.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for being here with us on Through the Vine. I'd love to have you back for a second session soon. I would like to continue this conversation. I want to go on a deep dive into universal wisdom and spend a couple hours on what this exploration of consciousness really looks like. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Many, many blessings and continued explorations on your journey.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being you.